The ambulance lights flashed against the bedroom walls as I held my grandmother's frail hand. Her breathing was shallow, her skin burning with fever. 10 hours ago I'd been in Iraq, excited to surprise my family with my unexpected leave. Instead, I found our house empty except for Grandma unconscious and severely dehydrated in the back bedroom. I frantically checked my phone while paramedics worked. There they were, my parents' fresh vacation photos from a luxury resort in Cabo, laughing with cocktails while Grandma lay dying. My hands shook as I scrolled through their posts. "Living our best life," the caption read under a sunset beach photo posted just 3 hours ago. The ambulance ride was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept whispering to Grandma that everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure she could hear me. The paramedics had already started an IV, explaining she was severely dehydrated. One of them asked how long she'd been alone, and shame washed over me even though this wasn't my fault. "I just got back from deployment today," I explained. "I thought my parents were taking care of her." The paramedic's expression softened. "Thank you for your service. We'll take good care of her." At the hospital, they whisked Grandma away while I filled out paperwork with shaking hands. I tried calling my parents again, but their phones went straight to voicemail. I left increasingly desperate messages. "Mom, Dad, it's Shelly. Grandma's in the hospital. She's really sick. Call me back immediately. Your phones are probably off because you're in Mexico, but this is an emergency. Grandma might be dying. Please call me. The doctors need to talk to you. This is serious." After the third voicemail, I gave up and focused on the forms: medical history, medications, insurance information. I knew some of it from growing up with Grandma practically raising me, but there were gaps. When the nurse asked about her current medications, I had to admit I didn't know. "Let me call my parents again," I said, growing increasingly frustrated. No answer. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Winters, came out to speak with me an hour later. Her expression was grave. "Your grandmother is severely dehydrated and malnourished. She has untreated pneumonia that's progressed significantly. When was the last time she saw a doctor?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been deployed for 9 months. My parents were supposed to be caring for her." Dr. Winters' expression tightened slightly. "She's also got pressure sores consistent with being bedridden without proper care." "How long has she been alone?" "I have no idea," I said, tears welling up. "When I got home today, I found her like this. My parents are in Mexico on vacation. I didn't know. I would never have left if I'd known." Dr. Winters placed a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't your fault. We're doing everything we can for her now." They admitted Grandma to the ICU. I sat beside her bed watching the rise and fall of her chest, listening to the steady beeping of monitors. The hospital room was cold and sterile, so different from the warm kitchen where she'd taught me to bake cookies or the living room where she'd read me stories. Grandma had practically raised me. When my parents were too busy with work or social obligations, she was there for school plays, soccer games, skinned knees, and broken hearts. Every important moment in my life featured Grandma's unwavering support. And now she lay here frail and abandoned. I scrolled through my phone again, looking at my parents' social media. There were dozens of photos from their Cabo trip, spa treatments, cocktails on the beach, sunset sailing. They looked carefree and happy while Grandma was fighting for her life. The timestamp on their latest post was just 2 hours ago, a selfie at an expensive restaurant with the caption, "Another perfect day in paradise." A nurse came in to check Grandma's vitals, her movements efficient but gentle. "Has she been responsive at all?" I asked. "She opened her eyes briefly earlier," the nurse said. "She's very weak, but she's fighting." As if on cue, Grandma stirred slightly. Her eyelids fluttered, and she looked at me with momentary recognition. "Shelly." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Grandma," I said, gently squeezing her hand. "You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay." She tried to speak again, but started coughing instead. The nurse quickly adjusted her oxygen. "Don't try to talk right now," the nurse advised. "Just rest." But Grandma was persistent, squeezing my hand with surprising strength given her condition. "Your grandfather's safe," she whispered. "The combination. Your birthday." Her eyes closed again as exhaustion overtook her. The nurse checked her IV and made notes in her chart. "She needs to rest now," she said. "But it's good she recognized you. That's a positive sign." After the nurse left, a social worker named Teresa came to speak with me. Her kind face was serious as she sat down. "I understand your grandmother was found alone," she asked. I nodded, explaining about my unexpected return and my parents' vacation. And who has legal responsibility for your grandmother's care? My parents, I said. After my grandfather died 3 years ago, they moved into his house to help care for Grandma. At least that's what they told me. Teresa made notes. I need to ask some difficult questions. Based on your grandmother's condition, we're concerned about potential elder neglect. The word neglect hit like a physical blow. I'd seen the results of neglect in Iraq. Abandoned children, elderly people left behind during evacuations. But this was my family, my parents. I had no idea, I said, my voice cracking. I've been sending money home from my deployment. They told me everything was fine. Teresa nodded sympathetically. We're not making accusations. We just need to understand the situation to ensure your grandmother's safety going forward. As she asked more questions, a horrible realization began forming in my mind. I remembered Grandma's words about my grandfather's safe. She wanted me to find something important enough that she used her limited strength to tell me about it. When visiting hours ended, I reluctantly left Grandma in the care of her nurses. I had to find that safe. I had to understand what was really going on. As I walked to my car, I checked my phone one more time. Still no calls from my parents, but another Instagram photo had appeared, my mother getting a massage at the resort spa. The caption read, "Self-care is essential. Treating myself to the works, while hubby goes sport fishing." My hands shook with anger as I started the car. Self-care was essential. What about Grandma's care? I drove toward my grandparents' house, the house where I'd grown up, the house my parents now lived in, the house where I'd found my grandmother dying alone, just hours ago. I needed answers, and I suspected I'd find them in my grandfather's safe. The house was eerily quiet when I returned. The silence felt oppressive as I walked down the hallway to what had been my grandparents' bedroom. Everything looked different now. Modern furniture had replaced my grandparents' antique bedroom set, and the walls were painted a trendy gray instead of the warm yellow Grandma had loved. I stood in the doorway, momentarily disoriented. Where would the safe be now? When Grandpa was alive, it had been in their closet hidden behind his suits. I checked there first, but found only my father's golf clothes and my mother's extensive shoe collection. Think Shelly. If they redecorated, where would they move the safe? I methodically searched the house, checking every closet, looking under beds, tapping walls for hollow sounds. Nothing. Finally, I went to the garage, where boxes of my grandparents' belongings were stacked in a corner labeled Goodwill in my mother's handwriting. My throat tightened. They were planning to donate my grandparents' things without even asking me if I wanted any keepsakes. As I moved the boxes aside, I spotted a large object covered with a tarp in the corner. Pulling it back revealed my grandfather's old desk, the massive oak piece where he'd paid bills and written letters. And I knew immediately that's where the safe would be. Sure enough, when I pulled open the bottom right drawer and removed the false bottom, there was the safe, small black with a simple combination lock. "Your birthday," Grandma had said. I tried the month and day. No luck. Then I tried the full date, including the year. The lock clicked open. Inside the safe were several folders, a small jewelry box, and a leather journal. I took everything out and sat on the garage floor, starting with the folder labeled Will and Testament. As I read through the legal document, my hands began to shake. This house that my parents now claimed as their own, belonged to my grandmother. My grandfather had left it to her, not to my parents. According to the will, my parents had been allowed to move in to care for Grandma, but the property would eventually pass to me. There were other assets, too. Investments, bank accounts, even mineral rights to land in West Texas. All of it was supposed to be managed for Grandma's care with my parents as trustees. But based on her condition, they clearly weren't using the money for its intended purpose. The second folder contained bank statements. I flipped through them, my stomach sinking. Large withdrawals, transfers to my parents' personal accounts, credit card payments for luxury items. And there, just last week, a $50,000 withdrawal marked vacation advance. $50,000 for a vacation, while Grandma lay neglected at home. I opened the jewelry box next, expecting to find my grandmother's heirlooms, her wedding ring, the pearl necklace my grandfather had given her on their 50th anniversary, the diamond earrings that had belonged to her. Mother. It was empty. The final item was my grandfather's journal. I opened it with trembling hands, finding entries from the last year of his life. His neat, precise handwriting filled page after page with concerns about my parents' spending habits, their impatience with caring for Grandma, their constant pressure for access to more funds. The final entry, dated just days before his death, broke my heart. I fear I've made a terrible mistake in trusting Margaret's care to Robert and Diane. Today I overheard them discussing putting her in a facility once I'm gone, despite our agreement that she would remain in our home. I've spoken with Attorney Brennan about changing the trust terms, but my health is failing rapidly. If something happens to me, I pray that Shelly will return and set things right. She is the only one I trust with our legacy. Tears streamed down my face as I read my grandfather's final words. He had known. He had seen who my parents really were, and he had tried to protect Grandma. Beneath the journal was a hidden compartment containing an envelope addressed to me. Inside were more recent documents, a power of attorney form granting me authority over Grandma's affairs in case of emergency already signed and notarized. There was also a letter from Grandma dated just 6 months ago. My dearest Shelly, if you're reading this, something has happened that made you look in the safe. I pray it isn't too late. Your parents have changed since your grandfather died. They resent caring for me and speak cruelly when they think I can't hear. The money is disappearing and I fear what will happen when it's gone. I've signed the enclosed documents giving you power to make decisions if necessary. There is also a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank containing items I've hidden away. I'm so proud of your service to our country, and I don't want to pull you away from your important work. But if you find this, please know that I love you more than anyone in this world. Always, Grandma. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. All this time while I was serving overseas, believing my parents were caring for Grandma, they had been systematically stealing from her and neglecting her most basic needs. As I collected the documents to take with me, I noticed one more folder tucked into the side of the safe. This one contained photos, dozens of them chronicling my childhood with my grandparents. Christmases, birthdays, my high school graduation with Grandpa beaming proudly beside me in his veteran's cap. These were the memories my parents had packed away, planning to discard. I gathered everything into my backpack, making sure to leave the safe exactly as I had found it. My parents couldn't know I'd discovered their betrayal. Not yet. First, I needed legal advice. I took one last look at my grandfather's desk before covering it with the tarp again. I'll make this right, I promised him silently. I won't let you down. As I walked back through the house, I noticed my mother's designer purses casually tossed on the couch, my father's new golf clubs by the door, a receipt for a $75 bottle of wine on the counter. All purchased with money meant for Grandma's care. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another Instagram post from my mother last night in paradise. Making the most of it. They were still in Cabo, oblivious to the crisis at home, to the fact that their neglect had nearly killed Grandma, to the reckoning that awaited them. I walked out of the house with newfound purpose. My first call would be to my grandfather's lawyer. According to the letterhead on the will, his name was Jonathan Brennan. If he was still practicing, he would know exactly what to do next. I didn't sleep that night. After leaving several urgent messages at Jonathan Brennan's law office, I returned to the hospital to sit with Grandma. She remained unconscious, but the doctor said her vital signs were slowly improving. The antibiotics were fighting the pneumonia, and the fluids were addressing her dehydration. Still, she was dangerously weak. At 7 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Jonathan Brennan himself. Miss Walker, this is Jonathan Brennan. I received your messages regarding Margaret Patterson. I can meet you at 8 if that works. His office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. The receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes, led me to a wood-paneled conference room where Mr. Brennan was waiting. He was in his 60s with silver hair and a serious expression that softened when I entered. Shelly Walker, he said, extending his hand. You look just like your grandfather. He was one of my favorite clients and friends. I placed my backpack on the table and began pulling out the documents I'd found. Mr. Brennan, I need your help. My grandmother is in the hospital and I've discovered something terrible. For the next hour, I explained everything, finding Grandma alone and neglected my parents' vacation, the documents in the safe, the evidence of financial exploitation. Mr. Brennan listened intently, occasionally making notes. "I suspected something like this might be happening," he said when I finished. "Your grandfather came to me with concerns shortly before he passed. We were in the process of restructuring the trust when he died. Unfortunately, without his signature on the updated documents, the original arrangements remained in place." "What can we do now?" I asked. "Grandma gave me power of attorney for emergencies. Is this enough to protect her?" Mr. Brennan examined the document. "This is properly executed. It allows you to make medical and financial decisions if your grandmother is incapacitated, which she currently is. It's a start, but given the circumstances, we should petition the court for emergency guardianship." "How quickly can we do that?" "I can file the paperwork today. With your grandmother in the ICU and evidence of neglect, a judge should expedite the hearing." He leaned forward. "However, you should be prepared. Your parents will fight this, and it could get ugly. Are you certain you want to proceed?" I thought about Grandma lying in that hospital bed, about the empty medication bottles, about my parents spending her money in Cabo while she suffered alone. "I'm certain," I said firmly. "What do you need from me?" The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, affidavits, and phone calls. Mr. Brennan was efficient, his decades of experience evident in how quickly he assembled the necessary documentation. He also arranged for a forensic accountant to examine the financial records I'd found. "Based on these bank statements, it appears your parents have diverted approximately $320,000 over the past 3 years," the accountant reported. "That's not including the value of any personal property they may have liquidated." $320,000. Money that should have gone to Grandma's care and comfort. The amount was staggering. As Mr. Brennan finished preparing the emergency guardianship petition, my phone finally rang with my mother's number. "Should I answer it?" I asked. "Yes," Mr. Brennan advised. "But don't reveal what we're doing. Simply tell them Grandma is in the hospital and they need to come home immediately." I took a deep breath and answered, "Mom, Shelly. What a surprise. Are you on leave? Why didn't you tell us you were coming home?" Her voice was light casual, with the slight slur that suggested she'd been drinking. "Mom, where are you?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We're still in Cabo, honey. Having an absolute blast. You should see this place, it's paradise." "Mom, I need you to listen carefully. Grandma is in the ICU. I found her alone at the house yesterday. She's very sick." There was a pause, then my mother's voice changed. "What do you mean you found her? Where was the nurse?" "What nurse, Mom?" There was no nurse. Grandma was alone, unconscious, with untreated pneumonia and severe dehydration. The doctor says she could have died if I hadn't found her. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear muffled voices as my mother presumably spoke to my father. "That's impossible," she finally said, her tone defensive. "We hired a service to check on her daily. They must have missed a day." "Mom, stop lying. There was no service. Her medication bottles were empty or expired. She has bed sores. She hasn't been cared for properly in weeks." "Don't you dare accuse us." My mother's voice rose sharply. "We've sacrificed everything to take care of your grandmother. You have no idea how difficult it's been. Difficult enough to spend $50,000 on a vacation while she was dying." The words slipped out before I could stop them. There was dead silence on the line. "What did you say?" My mother's voice was suddenly cold. Mr. Brennan was shaking his head at me, warning me not to reveal too much. "You need to come home now," I said firmly. "The doctors need to speak with you." "We'll be on the next flight," my father's voice cut in. He must have taken the phone from my mother. "Don't do anything until we get there, Shelly. There are things you don't understand." "Just get here," I said, and hung up. Mr. Brennan looked at me with concern. "They'll be suspicious now. We need to move quickly." We went directly to the courthouse, where Mr. Brennan used his connections to get an emergency hearing with Judge Tamara Wilson. She reviewed our petition and the accompanying medical reports with a grim expression. "This is deeply troubling," she said. "I'm granting temporary emergency guardianship to Miss Walker effective immediately. I'm also freezing the accounts connected to the trust pending investigation. We'll schedule a full hearing once your grandmother is stable enough to participate if possible." By the time we returned to the hospital, Grandma was awake and slightly more alert. When she saw me, tears filled her eyes. "You found it," she whispered. "You came back to me." "I'm here, Grandma," I said, holding her fragile hand, "and I'm not going anywhere." She managed a weak smile before drifting back to sleep. The doctor approached with an update. She's responding to treatment, but she's still very weak. Recovery will be slow given her age and the extent of the neglect. Has her family been notified? Yes, I said. My parents are on their way back from Mexico. But I should warn you, they're likely to be difficult. They've been appointed as her caregivers, but I've just obtained emergency guardianship due to their neglect. The doctor nodded understanding. We'll make sure security is aware of the situation. Your grandmother's safety is our priority. As I sat by Grandma's bedside watching her sleep, my phone began buzzing with text messages from my parents. What have you done? The bank just called saying our accounts are frozen. This is a misunderstanding. Don't talk to anyone else until we get home. Your military service has clearly affected your judgment. We've done nothing wrong. I turned off my phone and focused on Grandma. Whatever storm was coming, I would weather it. For her, for Grandpa, for the truth. My parents arrived at the hospital the next morning, tanned and dressed in expensive resort wear that looked jarringly out of place in the sterile ICU. My mother's diamond bracelet caught the fluorescent light as she rushed toward me, face contorted with a mixture of anger and forced concern. "Shelly, what is going on?" she demanded loud enough that several nurses looked up from their station. "Why are our accounts frozen? Why is your grandmother's doctor refusing to speak with us?" My father stood slightly behind her, his expression calculating rather than concerned. He'd always been the strategist of the pair, while my mother provided the emotional theatrics. "Let's talk somewhere private," I suggested, nodding toward a family consultation room. Once inside with the door closed, my mother's pretense of worry vanished. "What have you done?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to have our credit cards declined at the resort? We had to borrow money for the flight home." I stared at her incredulously. "Grandma nearly died from neglect, and you're worried about embarrassment." "Don't be dramatic," my father interjected. "Your grandmother has health issues. She has good days and bad days." "Bad days," I repeated. "She has pneumonia, severe dehydration, malnutrition, and pressure sores from lying in the same position for days. Her medications haven't been refilled in months." "That's not a bad day, Dad. That's criminal neglect." My mother sank into a chair, suddenly switching tactics. "You don't understand how difficult it's been," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Your grandmother requires constant care. We needed a break." "A $50,000 break?" I asked quietly. My father's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the bank records, Dad. I know about the withdrawals, the transfers, the credit card payments. I know you've taken over $300,000 that was meant for Grandma's care." "You had no right to look at those records," my mother snapped, the tears instantly gone. "Actually, I do have the right," I said, pulling out the power of attorney document. "Grandma gave me emergency power of attorney 6 months ago, and Judge Wilson has granted me temporary guardianship until a full hearing." My father's face darkened. "You went behind our backs to a judge, based on what? One bad day when your grandmother was sick." "Based on financial exploitation and elder neglect," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "The house doesn't belong to you, Dad. It never did. It belongs to Grandma, and eventually to me." "That was always Grandpa's plan." My mother stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We moved in to take care of her. We put our lives on hold. That house is our compensation." "Compensation?" I repeated incredulously. "You were paid to be her caregivers, paid very well according to the bank records. Money you spent on yourselves while Grandma went without basic care." My father stepped forward, his face inches from mine. "You ungrateful little..." The door opened, interrupting whatever he was about to say. Dr. Winters stood there, flanked by a hospital security guard. "Is everything all right in here?" she asked, her gaze moving between us. "Everything's fine," my father said, smoothly, stepping back. "Family discussion. We'd like to see Margaret now." "Mrs. Patterson is resting," Dr. Winters replied. "And according to our records, her medical decisions are currently under the authority of Miss Walker here." She turned to me. "Your grandmother is asking for you, Shelly." My parents looked stunned. "This is outrageous," my mother sputtered. "We're her son and daughter-in-law." "And I'm her legally appointed guardian," I replied. "You can see her tomorrow during regular visiting hours when she's stronger." "You can't keep us from her," my father threatened. The security guard stepped forward slightly. "Sir, we need to ask you to lower your voice. This is an ICU." My father's face flushed with anger, but he controlled himself. "This isn't over, Shelly. Not by a long shot. As they stormed out, I collapsed into a chair shaking. Dr. Winters sat beside me. Are you okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. They're going to fight this. Based on your grandmother's condition when she was admitted, they'll have a difficult time, Dr. Winters said gently. The evidence of neglect is well documented in her medical records. When I entered Grandma's room a few minutes later, her eyes were open and clearer than they'd been since I found her. They came back, she said softly. Yes, I confirmed, sitting beside her bed. They're angry, Grandma. I heard them shouting. She reached for my hand. I'm sorry to put you in this position. Don't apologize, I insisted. This isn't your fault. None of it is. She squeezed my hand weakly. There's something else you should know. Her voice dropped to a whisper. After your grandfather died, I was afraid of what Robert and Diane might do. I installed a small camera in my bedroom clock. I wanted evidence if things got worse. My breath caught. Grandma, are you saying you have recordings? She nodded slightly. On an SD card. In the clock. I asked the home health aide who used to visit to help me set it up before Robert fired her. They fired your home health aide. This was the first I'd heard of it. 6 months ago, she confirmed. Said it was too expensive. That's when I wrote you the letter and signed the power of attorney. The realization that Grandma had been systematically preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, creating legal safeguards, broke my heart. How terrified she must have been living with people who were supposed to care for her but instead saw her as nothing more than a source of money. I'll get the SD card, I promised her, and I'll make sure you never have to be afraid again. That evening, while my parents were presumably consulting with lawyers of their own, I returned to the house. The bedroom clock was still there, an antique model with a hidden compartment in the back. Inside, just as Grandma had described, was a tiny SD card. I took it to Mr. Brennan's office, where we viewed the recordings together on his computer. What we saw was devastating. My parents openly discussing plans to sell the house, mocking Grandma when she asked for help, ignoring her pleas for water and medication, leaving her alone for days at a time while they went on shopping. Trips and weekend getaways. In one particularly damning clip, my mother rifled through Grandma's jewelry box, trying on her treasured pieces before putting them in a bag and saying to my father, "She'll never notice they're gone. We can say we put them in storage for safekeeping." Mr. Brennan's expression was grim as he stopped the playback. "This is more than enough for the guardianship hearing," he said. "It's also enough for criminal charges of elder abuse and financial exploitation." The weight of what was happening hit me fully then. My own parents were facing potential criminal charges. The family I'd grown up in was fractured beyond repair. "What happens next?" I asked quietly. "We present this evidence at the hearing," Mr. Brennan replied. "Given what we've seen, the judge will almost certainly make your guardianship permanent and may refer the case to the district attorney." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was my father's administrative assistant at his accounting firm. "Shelly, your parents told the partners at the firm that your grandmother has dementia and you're exploiting her confusion to steal their inheritance. They're turning people against you. Be careful." So it had begun. The campaign to discredit me, to paint Grandma as mentally incompetent, and me as the villain. I should have expected nothing less. Back at the hospital, Grandma was sitting up slightly, sipping broth from a cup the nurse held for her. Her improvement in just 2 days was remarkable, though she was still desperately frail. I found the recordings, I told her softly. They're safe with Mr. Brennan now. Relief washed over her face. "Then it's over." "Almost," I promised. "Just a little longer, and everything will be set right." The next morning, as I was helping Grandma with her breakfast, my parents appeared in the doorway with a man in an expensive suit, clearly their attorney. "We'd like a moment alone with Margaret," the lawyer announced. Grandma's hand tightened around mine. "No," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. "Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my granddaughter." My father stepped forward. "Mom, you're confused. Shelly is taking advantage of your condition to—" "I am not confused," Robert, Grandma interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "I know exactly what you and Diane have done. I know about the money. I know about my jewelry. I know you left me alone for days while you were in Mexico." My mother's face contorted with anger. "This is ridiculous. You're clearly not in your right mind." "Mrs. Patterson," their lawyer intervened smoothly, "your son and his wife have only your best interests at heart. They've sacrificed greatly to care for you. No, Grandma said firmly. They sacrificed nothing. They stole from me. They neglected me. They would have let me die alone if Shelly hadn't come home. The lawyer looked uncomfortable for the first time. My father tried again, his voice gentler. Mom, you need professional care. We were arranging for a nursing home before Shelly interfered. A nursing home paid for with the proceeds from selling my house, Grandma asked. The house Edward left to me and then to Shelly. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. They hadn't realized how much Grandma knew about their plans. I'm tired, Grandma announced. I'd like you to leave now. All of you except Shelly. This is outrageous, my mother began, but the lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm. We'll continue this discussion another time, he said, steering my parents toward the door. Once they were gone, Grandma sank back against her pillows, exhausted by the confrontation, but with a gleam of triumph in her eyes. Did you see their faces when I mentioned the house? She asked. They didn't know I knew. I smiled, proud of her courage. You were amazing, Grandma. She closed her eyes. I've spent 3 years being afraid in my own home. Not anymore. Later that day, Dr. Winters confirmed that Grandma was stable enough to sign legal documents. With a notary present, she formally confirmed her wish for me to serve as her permanent guardian. The final battle would take place in court, but with Grandma's testimony, the video evidence, and the financial records, I finally felt confident that justice would prevail. That evening, my phone began buzzing continuously with calls and messages. To Humtree, from my parents, their friends, distant relatives I barely knew. The campaign to pressure me had begun in earnest. By the time I silenced my phone for the night, there were 47 missed calls. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. 2 days later, Adult Protective Services investigator Marion Lewis sat across from me in the hospital cafeteria reviewing her preliminary findings. Based on the medical evidence and financial records, we're recommending that the district attorney pursue charges for elder neglect and financial exploitation, she explained. We've also contacted the police to open a formal investigation into the missing jewelry and other valuables. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that Grandma would get justice, sorrow that it had come to this, my own parents facing criminal charges. What happens now? I asked. The criminal investigation will proceed separately from the guardianship case, Marian explained. Your temporary guardianship hearing is scheduled for next week, but given the evidence and your grandmother's clear wishes, I don't anticipate any issues with making it permanent. As we spoke, my phone buzzed with yet another message. This one was from my cousin Tyler, my father's brother's son. Just heard what happened with Grandma. Mom and Dad are stunned. Aunt Diane called asking us to support them at the hearing, but we've had concerns for a while. Call me. It wasn't the first such message I'd received. As word spread through the family about what had happened, people were choosing sides. Some, like my father's golf buddies, and my mother's social circle, were firmly in their camp, repeating the narrative that Grandma was confused and I was manipulating her. But others, especially those who had noticed Grandma's declining condition during family gatherings but hadn't known how to intervene, were reaching out to offer support. My phone rang again. This time it was Captain Rivera, my commanding officer from Iraq. Walker, how's your grandmother doing? He asked when I answered. Better, sir, I replied, surprised he was calling. I'd requested emergency extension of my leave but hadn't explained the full situation. Good to hear. Listen, I've reviewed your extension request. Under the circumstances, I'm approving 60 days of family caregiving leave effective immediately. Take care of your grandmother, Walker. That's an order. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, sir. The unit's behind you, he added. Peterson's wife is a nurse at Valley Hospital. She told him what happened. The team's organizing a rotation to help out however they can. I swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the support. I don't know what to say. Say nothing. Do what needs doing. We've got your 6. After hanging up, I returned to Grandma's room to find her sitting in a chair by the window, the first time she'd been out of bed since her admission. Her improvement was remarkable, though she was still painfully thin and weak. The doctor says I might be able to go home in a few days, she told me, a hint of anxiety in her voice. But I can't go back to that house. Not with them. You won't have to, I assured her. I've been looking into assisted living options until we figure out something permanent. She shook her head firmly. No facilities. Your grandfather and I promised each other we'd never end up in one of those places. Then we'll find another solution, I promised. Maybe a rental apartment where I can stay with you until everything's sorted out legally. She smiled, patting my hand. Always my problem solver, just like your grandfather. That evening, as I was helping Grandma prepare for bed, her dinner tray still mostly untouched despite her improvement, the hospital room phone rang. It was the nurse's station alerting us that Detective Morris from the Financial Crimes Unit had arrived and was requesting to speak with us. Detective Morris was a compact woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took detailed notes as Grandma explained about the missing jewelry and other valuables, then turned to me. We've obtained a warrant to search your parents' financial records based on the evidence you and Mr. Brennan provided. The initial findings are significant. How significant, I asked. We've discovered they recently made a down payment on a vacation property in Cabo San Lucas, she replied. $200,000 wired from an account that appears to contain commingled funds from your grandmother's trust. The amount was staggering. They were planning to move to Mexico. It appears so. We also found emails regarding the sale of your grandparents' house. They had already accepted an offer and were planning to close next month. Grandma gasped softly. They were going to sell my home without telling me. Detective Morris nodded grimly. The buyer believed you had already been moved to a care facility. Your parents forged documents indicating they had power of attorney. The depths of my parents' betrayal seemed bottomless. Not content with stealing Grandma's money, they had planned to sell her home out from under her and disappear to Mexico with the proceeds. There's more, Detective Morris continued. We found emails between your parents discussing the need to accelerate the timeline because, and I quote, the old lady is hanging on too long and the money is running out. Grandma's face crumpled and I moved to sit beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry to be so blunt, Detective Morris, said her tone softening. But you both need to understand the seriousness of what we're dealing with. Will they go to jail? Grandma asked quietly. Financial exploitation of an elder is a felony, Detective Morris confirmed. Given the amounts involved and the evidence of premeditation, prison time is likely if they're convicted. After the detective left, Grandma was unusually quiet. I thought she might be upset about the prospect of her son going to prison, but when she finally spoke, her words surprised me. I kept hoping there was some explanation, she said softly. Some reason that would make what they did less terrible. But they really were just waiting for me to die. I held her frail hand in mine, wishing I could shield her from this pain. Not everyone abandoned you, I reminded her gently. Tyler and his parents have called every day to check on you. Your bridge club friends have sent flowers. Your old neighbors have offered to help in any way they can. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I know. It's just hard to accept that my own son could be so cruel. The next morning brought another surprise. An email from my father's sister, Aunt Cheryl, who lived in Oregon and whom I hadn't seen in years. Shelly, I've been following what's happening through Tyler. I'm horrified by what Robert and Diane have done. I'm flying in tomorrow to help however I can. Your grandmother shouldn't have to go through this alone, and neither should you. Support was coming from unexpected places, creating a network of care around Grandma that my parents had systematically dismantled. Each day brought new allies, old friends of my grandparents' military buddies offering help, distant family members expressing shock and solidarity. But with the support came intensified pressure from my parents and their enablers. The missed calls on my phone multiplied daily. 62, 75, 80. Then came the bombshell. During a routine meeting with Mr. Brennan to prepare for the guardianship hearing, he received an email that made him sit back in shock. Your parents' attorney has withdrawn from the case, he announced, reading from his screen. Why, I asked, surprised. He cites irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy and newly discovered evidence that creates an ethical conflict. Mr. Brennan looked up, his expression serious. This is significant, Shelly. Attorneys don't withdraw from high-profile cases without serious reason. My guess is they showed him the video evidence and he realized he couldn't ethically continue representing them. That same afternoon, Detective Morris called with an update that confirmed our suspicions. We executed a search warrant on your parents' safety deposit box, she reported. We recovered jewelry matching the descriptions your grandmother provided, along with documents detailing offshore accounts. We've frozen those accounts pending further investigation. The net was tightening around my parents, but rather than backing down, they escalated their campaign against me. Social media posts appeared claiming I was unstable from PTSD, that I was manipulating Grandma for financial gain, that I had always been jealous of their relationship with my grandparents. It was painful to see people I'd grown up with, family, friends, neighbors, even some distant cousins, accepting and sharing these lies. But for every person who turned against me, 2 more stepped forward in support. My military unit began a rotating schedule of visits to keep Grandma company when I needed to meet with lawyers or investigators. My high school friend Melissa, now a social worker, helped navigate the complex healthcare system to ensure Grandma would have proper support after discharge. Aunt Cheryl arrived and immediately began organizing family photos and mementos she'd saved from my grandparents' home before my parents could dispose of them. A community was forming around us, stronger than the one my parents had tried to isolate Grandma from. The day before the guardianship hearing, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Susan Miller, your grandmother's former home health aide. I heard what happened. I have documentation of your parents' neglect from when I was caring for her. I reported my concerns but was ignored. I want to testify at the hearing." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Another witness to my parents' systematic neglect and exploitation. That evening, as Grandma prepared for discharge the following day contingent on the guardianship hearing results, my phone displayed an ominous notification: 82 missed calls. The pressure campaign had reached its peak, but we were ready. The truth was on our side, documented in medical records, bank statements, video evidence, and witness testimony. Tomorrow, justice would finally be served. The courtroom was tense as Judge Wilson called the emergency guardianship hearing to order. My parents sat at one table with their new attorney, a sharp-looking woman who specialized in elder law. Mr. Brennan and I sat at another with Grandma in a wheelchair beside us, determined to speak for herself, despite her still fragile condition. This hearing is to determine whether the emergency guardianship granted to Shelly Walker should be made permanent. Judge Wilson began. "I understand Mrs. Patterson wishes to address the court." Mr. Brennan helped Grandma to the witness stand, where she insisted on standing despite the court officer's offer of a chair. "Mrs. Patterson, please state for the record whether you wish your granddaughter Shelly Walker to serve as your guardian," Judge Wilson instructed. Grandma's voice was weak but clear. "I do, Your Honor. Shelly is the only person I trust to make decisions for me." "And you understand that this would give Miss Walker legal authority over your financial and medical decisions?" "Yes, Your Honor. That's what I want." My parents' attorney stood. "Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Patterson lacks capacity to make this decision due to cognitive decline." Judge Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Do you have medical evidence to support this claim?" "We have testimony from family friends who have observed Mrs. Patterson's confusion," the attorney replied. "Hearsay from friends is not medical evidence," Judge Wilson noted dryly. "The hospital records indicate Mrs. Patterson is cognitively intact despite her physical condition." My father leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorney, who then addressed the court again. "Your Honor, we request an independent evaluation of Mrs. Patterson's cognitive status before proceeding." Mr. Brennan rose smoothly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson was evaluated by the hospital's geriatric psychiatrist just yesterday in anticipation of this very request. The report is included in the submitted materials and confirms she has full decisional capacity." Judge Wilson nodded. "I've reviewed that evaluation. Mrs. Patterson shows no signs of cognitive impairment that would prevent her from expressing her wishes regarding guardianship." My father stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. My mother is being manipulated by my daughter, who suddenly appeared after being absent for 9 months. "Mr. Patterson, sit down," Judge Wilson ordered sharply. "You'll have your opportunity to speak when called." After Grandma returned to her place beside me, the parade of witnesses began. Dr. Winters testified about Grandma's condition upon admission, making it clear that her ailments were the result of neglect rather than normal aging. Susan Miller, the former home health aide, described how my parents had dismissed her concerns and eventually fired her when she documented Grandma's declining condition. "They told me they could take care of Mrs. Patterson themselves," Susan testified. "But when I expressed concern about her weight loss and medication management, Mr. Patterson said, and I quote, 'She's 92, what do you expect? She's going to die soon anyway.'" A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My mother buried her face in her hands while my father stared straight ahead, his expression stony. Detective Morris testified next, outlining the financial investigation findings and The diverted funds the vacation property in Mexico, the planned sale of Grandma's house. Based on our investigation, she concluded this appears to be a systematic effort to deplete Mrs. Patterson's assets, while providing minimal care with the ultimate goal of selling her property and relocating outside U.S. jurisdiction. When it was my parents' turn to present their case, their new attorney did her best with limited options. She portrayed them as devoted caregivers overwhelmed by the challenges of elder care, suggested that I was motivated by inheritance concerns rather than Grandma's welfare, and tried to minimize the financial discrepancies as accounting errors rather than deliberate theft. My father testified that they had planned to use the proceeds from the house sale to place Grandma in a top-tier care facility, though he couldn't name which one when asked. My mother claimed that the vacation was a needed respite, and that they had arranged for a neighbor to check on Grandma daily, though the neighbor in question was in Florida at the time, according to her social media posts. The most damning moment came when Mr. Brennan asked permission to play excerpts from the video recordings Grandma had secretly made. "Objection!" my parents' attorney shouted. "These recordings were made without my client's knowledge or consent. One-party consent is legal in this state," Mr. Brennan countered calmly. Mrs. Patterson was a party to these conversations in her own home. Judge Wilson allowed the videos. The courtroom fell silent as we watched my mother complaining about having to waste money on the old lady's medications while wearing Grandma's missing diamond earrings. My father appeared in another clip, ignoring Grandma's pleas for water, saying, "You just had some yesterday. Stop being so demanding." In the most disturbing segment, both my parents were visible in Grandma's bedroom discussing their vacation plans while she lay visibly ill in bed. "We can't cancel now," my mother insisted on the recording. "We'll lose the deposit." "She'll be fine for a week," my father replied. "These old people are tougher than they look. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? We'd come back to an inheritance instead of a burden." By the time the video ended, there wasn't a sympathetic face for my parents in the courtroom. Even their attorney looked shaken. Judge Wilson called a brief recess before issuing her ruling. In the hallway, Aunt Cheryl put her arm around Grandma's shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Margaret," she said softly. "I should have visited more often. I should have seen what was happening. We all should have," Tyler added, standing nearby with his parents. "We noticed changes, but we believed Uncle Robert when he said everything was under control." When court resumed, Judge Wilson's decision was swift and unequivocal. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented today, I am granting permanent guardianship of Margaret Patterson to her granddaughter, Shelly Walker. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution of Robert and Diane Patterson for elder abuse and financial exploitation." She turned to my parents directly, her expression stern. "The court is also issuing a restraining order prohibiting you from contacting Mrs. Patterson except through counsel. You are to vacate her property within 48 hours, taking only personal effects. All financial assets remain frozen pending the criminal proceedings." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-profile case of elder abuse involving a prominent local accountant and his wife. Mr. Brennan handled the press while I helped Grandma into Aunt Cheryl's car. "Is it really over?" Grandma asked quietly as we drove away. "The guardianship part is," I assured her. "The criminal case will take longer, but you never have to see them again if you don't want to." That evening, as we settled Grandma into the guest room at Aunt Cheryl's house, our temporary arrangement until we could reclaim Grandma's home, my phone showed a staggering 82 missed calls. Most were from my parents or their supporters, but I noticed one from an unknown number and played the voicemail. "Miss Walker, this is Diana Reeves from Veterans Community Support Network. We heard about your situation from members of your unit. Our organization helps veterans facing family crises, particularly those involving elder care. We have resources that might be valuable to you and your grandmother. Please call us back at your convenience." It was yet another reminder that we weren't alone in this fight. The community my parents had tried to isolate Grandma from was rallying around her and around me. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Under court supervision, my parents removed their personal belongings from Grandma's house while I worked with a cleaning service to prepare it for her return. The house needed significant modifications to accommodate her reduced mobility, and the Veterans Community Support Network connected me with volunteers who installed ramps, grab bars, and other accessibility features. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation continued. Detective Morris kept me updated on their findings, each revelation more disturbing than the last. They discovered my parents had been systematically selling Grandma's valuables, antiques, artwork, even family heirlooms, through online marketplaces and consignment shops. They recovered some items, but many were gone forever. The district attorney filed formal charges, elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and attempted grand theft related to the house sale. My parents were arrested, booked, and released on bail pending trial. Their faces appeared on local news, their reputations in tatters. 6 weeks after the guardianship hearing, Grandma was strong enough to return home. As we drove up the familiar driveway, I worried how she would feel about re-entering the space where she had suffered so much neglect. But she surprised me with her resilience. "It feels different now," she said as I helped her up the front steps. "Like it's ours again, not theirs." Inside the house had been transformed. The cold, modern furniture my parents had favored was gone, replaced with comfortable pieces we'd selected together. Photos of Grandpa, of me, of our family in happier times adorned the walls. In the living room, Grandma's friends from her bridge club had arranged a welcome home gathering with flowers, homemade food, and warm embraces. "Look at you," exclaimed her friend Dorothy, hugging Grandma carefully. "You're looking more like yourself already." As Grandma settled in with her friends, I stepped onto the back porch for a moment alone. The weight of everything that had happened, finding Grandma near death, discovering my parents' betrayal, fighting the legal battle, managing my extended leave from the military, suddenly hit me full force. I leaned against the railing, tears streaming down my face. "You've done a remarkable thing," said a voice behind me. It was Susan Miller, the home health aide who had testified at the hearing. Most people wouldn't have had the courage to stand up to their own parents like that. I wiped my eyes. I didn't have a choice. They left Grandma to die. Susan nodded solemnly. And they nearly succeeded. But look at her now. She gestured through the window where Grandma was laughing with her friends, color in her cheeks, life in her eyes. You saved her in more ways than one. In the months that followed, Grandma grew stronger. With proper nutrition, medication, and therapy, she regained weight and mobility. The pneumonia cleared the pressure, sores healed, and her spirit, the indomitable Patterson spirit my grandfather had so admired, returned in full force. My parents' criminal trial was scheduled for the following spring. Their attorneys attempted various delaying tactics, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. They made one attempt at a plea bargain offering to relinquish all claims to Grandma's estate in exchange for dropped charges, but the district attorney refused. "Financial crimes are one thing," he explained to me, "but they left your grandmother to die. There has to be accountability for that." As Grandma's recovery progressed, we began discussing long-term plans. My military leave would eventually end, and we needed sustainable arrangements for her care. "I've been thinking," Grandma said one evening as we sat on the porch swing that had been my grandfather's favorite spot. "This house is too big for just me. But the guest house out back, the one your grandfather built for his mother, that would be perfect." The guest house had been used for storage since my great-grandmother's death, but it was a charming cottage with a bedroom, small kitchen, and sitting room. "You want to move into the guest house?" I asked, surprised. Grandma smiled. "No, dear. I want you to have the house as your grandfather intended. If you want it, that is. I'll take the cottage." I was stunned by her generosity. "Grandma, I can't take your home." "It's our home," she corrected gently. "And this way I maintain my independence while having you nearby. It's what Edward would have wanted." As we made plans to renovate both the main house and cottage, a surprising email arrived from my commanding officer. The Army was establishing a new veteran support program at the base near our town, and they were looking for experienced personnel to staff it. Would I be interested in a transfer? It would mean a desk job rather than deployment, but it would allow me to remain close to home. It felt like the universe was aligning to make our new arrangement possible. With the transfer approved, I could be there for Grandma while continuing my military career. The day my parents' trial was set to begin, they suddenly changed their plea to guilty, unable to face the public airing of all their misdeeds. They received 5 years in prison, each with restitution ordered for the full amount they had stolen. That evening, as Grandma and I sat in the garden she was gradually restoring, she asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. "Do you think we should try to reconcile with them after they serve their time?" I considered carefully before answering. "That's entirely your decision, Grandma. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." She nodded thoughtfully. Your grandfather always said forgiveness is for ourselves, not others. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again. Wise man, my grandpa, I said, smiling at her. He would be so proud of you, Shelly, she replied, tears glistening in her eyes. So very proud. As the sun set over our reclaimed home, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled. From the horror of finding Grandma near death, to the triumph of justice in the courtroom, from the pain of family betrayal to the joy of community support, we had emerged stronger, our bond deepened by adversity. You know, Grandma said, as if reading my thoughts, sometimes the worst moments in our lives reveal the best parts of ourselves and show us who truly matters. I nodded, taking her hand in mine, and sometimes they lead us right back home where we belong. 6 months after my parents began serving their prison sentences, Grandma and I settled into a new routine in our shared space. The main house had been renovated to accommodate my return to civilian life, while the guest house had been transformed into a cozy, accessible cottage perfect for Grandma's needs. A covered walkway connected the two buildings, symbolic of our commitment to remain connected while respecting each other's independence. Grandma's recovery had exceeded all medical expectations. At 93, she would never regain the vigor of youth, but her spirit was indomitable. Each morning, she tended the small herb garden outside her cottage, the same herbs she had once taught me to identify and use. Each afternoon, we shared tea on the connecting patio, catching up on our respective days. Each evening, we alternated cooking duties, preserving the family recipes that had nearly been lost. My military transfer had evolved into something more meaningful than I'd anticipated. The veteran support program I joined specialized in helping service members transition back to civilian life, particularly those caring for elderly relatives. My personal experience made me uniquely qualified to understand their challenges, and I found unexpected fulfillment in guiding others through similar journeys. You found your calling, Grandma observed one evening as I described helping a young Marine arrange home health care for his grandfather. Using your own pain to ease someone else's way, that's the Patterson legacy. The Patterson legacy. It had nearly been erased by my parents' greed, but now it was being rebuilt stone by stone, memory by memory. Part of that rebuilding involved reconnecting with extended family who had drifted away during my parents' isolation of Grandma. Aunt Cheryl visited regularly from Oregon. Cousin Tyler and his parents joined us for Sunday dinners. Even distant relatives reached out, sharing stories and photographs from family gatherings long past. The legal aftermath of my parents' crimes continued to unfold. The court-appointed receiver had recovered about 60% of the stolen funds, including the down payment on the Mexican vacation property. The jewelry my mother had taken was returned, though some pieces had already been sold and were irretrievable. More difficult to navigate were the occasional letters from prison. My father's were formal and impersonal, focusing on legal matters related to his assets and career. My mother's were emotional, alternating between self-pity and manipulation. I read each one, carefully shared the contents with Grandma, and filed them away without responding. They're still not taking responsibility, Grandma noted, after I read her my mother's latest letter, which blamed their actions on the unbearable stress of caregiving. Until they can face the truth of what they did, there's no foundation for reconciliation. Her wisdom guided us through this uncertain territory. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it would be on our terms with clear boundaries established and maintained. As winter turned to spring, Grandma suggested we use some of the recovered funds to establish a foundation in my grandfather's name, focused on preventing elder abuse through education and advocacy. The Edward Patterson Foundation for Elder Dignity was born with a mission to provide resources for families navigating the challenges of aging and to train financial institutions to recognize signs of exploitation. Your grandfather always said that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the good you do with them, Grandma explained as we finalized the foundation documents. This transforms their theft into something meaningful. The foundation quickly gained support in the community. Local banks implemented the training program we developed. Senior centers displayed our educational materials. Law enforcement agencies referred vulnerable elders to our resources. What had begun as our personal tragedy was becoming a force for positive change. On the anniversary of my unexpected return from Iraq, we hosted an open house for all who had supported us through our ordeal. Susan Miller, the home health aide whose testimony had been so crucial, was now the Foundation's first employee. Captain Rivera and members of my former unit mingled with Grandma's Bridge Club friends, Mr. Brennan, whose legal expertise had secured our victory, chatted with Detective Morris, whose investigation had uncovered the full extent of my parents' crimes. As I watched Grandma move confidently among our guests, sharing stories and laughter, I marveled at her resilience. A year ago, I had found her near death, abandoned by those who should have protected her. Today, she was surrounded by a community of choice rather than mere biology, her dignity restored, her future secured. "She's remarkable," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Judge Wilson, who had granted my guardianship petition and set our journey toward justice in motion. "She is," I agreed. "Sometimes I think she's stronger than all of us combined." "It runs in the family," Judge Wilson observed with a knowing smile. "What you did took extraordinary courage, Shelly. Standing against your own parents to protect her, that's a rare kind of strength." As the party wound down and guests departed, Grandma and I sat on the front porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She took my hand, her skin paper thin, but her grip still surprisingly strong. "I was thinking about your grandfather today," she said softly. "He always believed family was about actions, not just blood. The people who truly love you show it every day in big ways and small." I nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. My parents had been family by blood, but had failed in the actions that defined true family. The community that had rallied around us, some related, many not, had demonstrated the true meaning of family through their unwavering support. "I've learned so much from this past year," I said. "About courage, about resilience, about what really matters." Grandma smiled. "Every challenge carries a lesson if we're willing to see it. Your grandfather used to say that the measure of a person isn't found in their successes, but in how they respond to adversity." As darkness fell and stars appeared in the evening sky, we continued rocking gently on the porch swing my grandfather had built decades ago. The house behind us, once a battleground of greed and neglect, had been reclaimed as a sanctuary of healing and hope. The future stretched before us, not without challenges, but rich with possibility. "I think the most important thing I've learned," I said, "is that standing up for what's right is never easy but always necessary. Especially when it means standing up for those who can't defend themselves." Grandma squeezed my hand. "That's the true Patterson legacy. Not the house or the money, but the courage to do what's right no matter the cost." As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on our journey from darkness to light. My unexpected return from Iraq had revealed a painful truth, but it had also paved the way for healing and justice. The grandparents who had shaped my character continued to guide my path, even though only Grandma remained physically present. The house, now legally secured in the family trust with clear provisions for Grandma's lifetime care and eventual transfer to me, would remain a home rather than merely an asset. The will that had revealed my parents' deception had also provided the foundation for our new beginning. The 82 missed calls that had once represented pressure and manipulation had been replaced by messages of support and encouragement. "I think we should extend the foundation's work next year," Grandma said, breaking our comfortable silence. "Perhaps a scholarship for young people pursuing careers in elder care or elder law. Always looking forward, always thinking of others." That was the grandmother I adored, the woman who had taught me by example what true strength looked like. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I agreed. "Grandpa would approve." As we finally rose to go inside, the porch light illuminating our way, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road had been difficult, the pain of betrayal deep, but the outcome, this reclaimed home, this strengthened bond, this newfound purpose, made every struggle worthwhile. "Do you think the story of what happened to us might help others?" Grandma asked as we paused at the doorway. "Perhaps we should share it more widely through the foundation." I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her suggestion. "I think many people could learn from our experience about recognizing the signs of elder abuse, about having the courage to intervene, about rebuilding after betrayal." "Then that will be our next project," she decided. "Turning our pain into purpose." As we closed the door behind us, secure in our reclaimed home, I knew that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, we would face them together. Grandmother and granddaughter, bound not just by blood, but by shared values, mutual respect, and unwavering love. What would you do if you discovered a loved one was being neglected or exploited by their caretakers? It's a difficult situation that too many families face in silence. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share to help raise awareness about elder abuse. Your support could help someone recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to check on your elderly loved ones regularly. Sometimes the most important battles we fight are for those who can no longer fight for themselves.